Welcome to DocPoint Helsinki Documentary Film Festival 2022, Finland's only documentary film festival. My name is Ilona Hongisto, and I will moderate this Q&A with Payal Kapadia, director of A Night of Knowing Nothing, which is nominated for the DocPoint-YLE Award for Best International Documentary Film. How are you doing today, Payal?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and my film at your festival.
We are so pleased to have this opportunity to not only screen your film, but also to have this conversation with you around the features and characteristics of your film that we find so moving and thought-provoking and powerful in so many ways. I wanted to begin the conversation today from the title of your film, A Night of Knowing Nothing. I mean, this is a powerful title, I think, that leads us to the political themes of the film, but it also has a poetic charge. Could you talk a little bit about the political and poetic dimensions embedded in this title?
I think for me, for all of us actually who have been part of any kind of protest, especially at a student level, I think there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of vulnerability, and it's you don't know what's going to happen the next day. You don't know how things are going to go, and you're really in the thick of things. So we wanted to sort of have that sense of vulnerability in the title as well, and I think the title also was actually, it was a graffiti that somebody had made on the walls of the school, and we came across it, which was so wonderful. Like, we were looking through the photographs that we had taken, and suddenly there was a poem from an unknown poet, and somehow we just connected to it. And also because all the parts of the film, all the different things that happen, although it happens over a long time, there is a chronology to it. In the film, it feels as if everything is kind of just going from one to the other, almost as if it's a long night, one long night of a lot of things happening, things that are very painful also. So I think all these things sort of, all of us just sort of connected with that title because of these reasons.
Absolutely, and I think it really encapsulates really the feeling of that one night that unfolds in an unexpected manner, in a manner that one can't really predict as one enters into the situation. Relatedly, I think one of the things that I also found really interesting in the film was how it begins with the discovery of love letters written by a film student to their lover. And I was kind of relating to this. I was wondering about the beginnings of the filmmaking process. Was there a particular discovery or a particular turning point that kind of encouraged you to take on this filmmaking process?
Well, when me and my partner, Ronobir, who's the cinematographer and editor of the film, we started working together very early on. And we were shooting our friends at the time in around 2016. And we were taking a lot of interviews. We had no sense of what this film was going to be, but we just felt like we had to shoot. And so at the time, when we were interviewing our friends, it was more, everybody would tell us a lot about their love stories and about, how difficult it is to be with somebody, or in our society here, it's very difficult for young people to marry each other without consent from their parents, and because of various issues that we have in our culture. So this became something that all of us were always talking about. So even though the film eventually took on a totally different turn over the next 5 years that we continued to shoot, we felt that this was an element, at the end of the day, the film is about young people and youth. So the element of love had to remain somehow. So so I started working with a friend of mine, Himanshu, who's also the co-writer of the film. And we started thinking about how we could, have a love story that would encapsulate all the experiences that we had politically as well. And he and I were batchmates, classmates at the film school. So we kind of, connected in that space as well. So that's how we sort of designed a kind of a narrative to talk about larger things.
Absolutely. And I think that element of love that is so present in the film and that takes so many different forms also in the film appears also quite interestingly in relation to cinema itself, because in watching your film I get the strong impression that this might actually be described as a love letter to cinema or a love letter to documentary filmmaking. Would you agree?
I think because we were in film school and the film is sort of rooted in that film school space. So cinema was very much a part of everyday life. All of us would always have references that we would talk to each other about, or even the drawings and the graffitis made on the wall were of filmmakers. Like you see Ghotak, who is one of our most important filmmakers from India. You see his film drawn on one of the walls and things like this. So um, I guess because it was rooted in that space, we took the liberty of having our references to cinema. And I think everybody who was working on the film also was at one point a student at film school. So yeah, it came into the film, but I wouldn't disagree. I think we took a bit of liberty with this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And I'm
but
certainly glad that you did, because I think it's sort of the joy in making film, even in this kind of politically very tense context, comes through in the end result. So I think that's a very successful move on your team's part.
I think sometimes we also understand the world we inhabit and the politics that is around us through cinema. Sometimes it helps to bring a lot of clarity. Uh, so I think cinema helped me at least in that way.
Absolutely. And I think that's also, I might extend that to think about documentary film and the place of documentary film in the world. That documentary film is very well equipped to precisely make us the viewers as well to understand better these situations that we might not be so familiar with to begin with. And
Right.
in the case of your film, the way in which love has been embedded in the film in many ways, I think will help many audience members to engage with the thematics in a powerful way. So that's a very interesting feature I find in your work, and I think I also wanted to discuss in a little bit more detail the kind of detailed aesthetic features of this film, because it is a film that's very robust and pleasing also to watch. I mean, the aesthetics is very developed. And I particularly wanted to ask about the different kinds of imagery that you work with in this film. We have 8mm archival footage. We have CCTV footage that has been shot on mobile phones, as well as the material shot amidst the student protests. So could you first talk a little bit about these different materials that you used, and what was kind of your thinking in bringing these different kinds of materials together?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, we started shooting the film many years ago.
Yeah.
And after that, there were various things that happened around us, and a lot of our friends gave us their footage because we were not there at many places. And a lot of our friends said, okay, you're making this film, we've shot a little bit here, why don't you take the footage? So it became a sort of a found footage film. And even because sometimes when years pass, you look back at your own footage and it's been so long and you're no longer a student, that also feels like found footage because you're not that person anymore. So we started like looking at all the rush as found footage, and then we started digging for more. And then we came across this beautiful 8mm archive, and a lot of the images that we were seeing on say, for example, on our Facebook walls, or things that were being passed on as WhatsApp messages. We felt that all these images were also very much part of everything we were going through. So they had to make their way into the film. So it became a sort of, I would call this more a found footage film. And that's why the footage is so diverse.
Absolutely. And I think in my mind that how you describe the film as a found footage film also links to the political struggle that is being depicted in the film, that is a collective struggle as well. So there's an interesting connection there in the footage being used in the film and the theme that is being discussed.
I hope that because we always talk about this, that it's almost like a growing archive of memories, and perhaps many films can be made with the same rush,
Yeah.
and that's nice, and that's also the joy of nonfiction cinema.
Absolutely, that there's always the possibility of rewriting history from a new angle, from a new perspective, as one engages with found material or archived material more generally. I think relatedly to that aesthetic question of using different kinds of imagery and different kinds of materials, there were a couple of aesthetic things that really stood out for me that I found really interesting. One was the aspect ratio, the use of an aspect ratio that is quite uncommon and that kind of ties the more contemporary footage with the 8mm archival footage. And the other one was that you chose to shoot the contemporary events in black and white or in grayscale. Could you talk about these two decisions that seem really striking in the work?
I think some of it came from the influence of cinema itself, cinema history. I think at the time we were watching a lot of Soviet cinema, Czech cinema, the Czech New Wave, the French New Wave. So some of it maybe was a bit of influenced or homage to that aesthetic. But I think more importantly, through the film, we wanted to evoke a sense of nostalgia, because nostalgia is usually associated with a good feeling, but it's not necessarily in this film, not nostalgia for the past, because I think we cannot think that the past was better. So it's a nostalgia perhaps for this time that we lived in. And although it was very painful, I think it was very important for all of us to be a part of. And maybe we wanted to have that sense of nostalgia through this texture of this image, and to give it a sense of nostalgia without it being in the past. Talk about contemporary times, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. And in doing that, I feel like the choice of aspect ratio and the color toning choice as well highlights how cinema, and in this case documentary cinema, functions as a kind of a memory device, how it links to memories of perhaps past student revolts or past political struggles, but how it also creates a memory of a certain moment in time, and in this case the student protests that you and your team were documenting. So in making the film, were you also kind of were you thinking about creating a memory of these events for audiences to come, audiences of the future?
I think it was more kind of need, because we were all feeling something, and we were all in it. So I think we would, the process would be more kind of a reflection of what we were emotionally feeling at the time. The film is also not particularly chronological in the sense that that this event, that event is happening, but it kind of is just a sense of a particular moment in time. So I think that if somebody was actually looking for a more factual sense of things, this would not serve this purpose. But it could be some feelings that some of us who have experienced this time encapsulated within it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the film carries such a powerful sense of time in how it's been crafted together. And as you mentioned, the kind of a nostalgia for the present is very much a feature that stands out, and also the way in which that present moment and that nostalgia for the present then always also looks to the future in a way. I felt that there was a sense in the film of also looking to events to come and kind of passing the baton on to the next struggles that will lie ahead. So that's another, I think, an interesting feature, a temporal feature in the film, where it's not just the past and the present, but also the future. So would you care to comment on that kind of future-leaning aspect of your project?
No, I think you're right. I think there's the attempt was to have a sort of timelessness of it kind of having a continuity, because these struggles are not firstly unique to our country, to my country, there's a connection to various other movements happening all over the world. And also it is not necessarily just now, it's been continuing for a while, and it will continue.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of timelessness of, if also of, it could be that it's happening at any time, or like you say, it also talks about the future. um, so yeah, I think that sort of timelessness was certainly something that we were hoping to get with this sort of nature of the image.
Absolutely. And I think also the sound design of the film contributes precisely to this kind of a timelessness. I mean, there's a kind of an atmospherics that is created with sound that complements the images and kind of speaks with the images as well, that I think does exactly what you just described as a timelessness, and as a way of also carrying the political thematics to the future. So what was your kind of leading thought, or when you were planning on sound design and when you were thinking about the different features on this in the soundscape of the film? What were some of the aims or goals that you were going for there?
I really like to work with sound. I think it's, for me,
Yeah.
one of the most important parts of cinema.
Yeah.
And I think that with this film as well, we wanted to design the sound in a way that it wasn't illustrative of the image, uh, but it kind of evoked something which was beyond the scope of the diegetic image. And the juxtaposition of these two would perhaps create a third image in the mind of the viewer, and this was the attempt. And also because it is a found footage film and there are some limitations or also possibilities that comes with that, you can take a lot of liberties and experiment with the sound and its form, and I really enjoy doing that. And I think sound has a way to kind of affect you in a way, um, which is, well, the image kind of is at a distance, but sound is something that is really felt. So
Yeah.
this is an element, with that you wanted to work with, and
Yeah.
not just music, but actually the design and
Yeah.
the sounds that are within, in the sound design. So this was one, yeah, it was the attempt.
Absolutely. And I think in watching the film, I felt like the sound, in a way, activated the off-screen space of the images. Like, as you say, found footage imagery has certain limitations, but the sound, in a way, opens those limitations
Yeah.
up for further imaginations. And I think that was a kind of a powerful way of engaging the spectator into the thematics of the film and into the events that we could witness in the images, as well. So in that sense, the kind of opening up of what we see through sound and through sound design, precisely the clapping of hands or the sound of a tree somewhere,
Yes.
or someone passing by in the off-screen space. I think those were extremely interesting ways of engaging the spectator into thinking about these issues that you are presenting in your film. So in that sense, the dialogue between image and sound, I think, is crucial and absolutely beautifully achieved in this film.
Thank you.
I think I would slowly like to wrap up, but I have one more question, and it's a big question in the sense that it concerns hope, which is always a theme that comes up in political discussions and discussions about politically harsh situations. And the question of hope came to me in watching your film through the first scene and the ending scene. And you chose to start your film with a scene of people dancing and having a kind of having a good time, enjoying themselves. And you also close the film with a scene of people dancing and being joyful. And to me, that raised the question of hope and the kind of future orientedness of your film. So could you talk a little bit about the choice of beginning and ending with dancing and how that relates, or if it relates, to questions of hope in your political view?
I think, well, the reason that we had the dancing in the film was, the film is basically a homage to public universities in India. And I studied at a state-funded film school as well. So I benefited from this, from public university system. So, and in India, it was designed in a way, the public university system, that it could perhaps lead to a more equal society through access to education. Of course, I think that there have been a lot of failures on its part, but inherently the spaces were so designed that everybody, that there was a sense of freedom, and there was a sense of freedom to thought and dissent and political questioning. So, so this is what the university space has given all of us as well. So I think the dancing kind of was a representation of that freedom, because it's also a space where men and women can dance at this age freely, and it's wonderful. So I think the dancing was certainly a homage to that kind of space and what it's given us, all of us who studied in this space. And coming to the question of hope, I think we have to have hope. We have to have hope because people, in the most extreme situations, and when they are really pushed to a corner, have come to the streets, have stood up for, the rights of what they believe in. So I think in that sense, there is a sense of hopefulness in this situation. And also, I think that in both the dances, the last one certainly has filled with pathos, and it ends with a certain kind of, I mean, maybe I'm the one seeing it so, but for me, it is very melancholic as well. So there are two dances, but I think they're quite different from the journey of the film and where what it comes to. But yeah, I think
yeah. So perhaps it could also be read as a kind of call out to preserve what we've had in terms of the public institutions that have given opportunities, and it's a kind of a reminder for all of us what it takes and how important it is to preserve these institutions.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, but I would like to thank you, Payal, for this conversation, and also for sharing your beautiful film with us and with the festival. And we look forward to your films to come, to the next projects that we can find in the festival circuit. I hope in the years to come. And we wish you all the best for 2022. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.